Okay, well, welcome everybody to Solar Noon Tuesday, and let's go ahead and move on to the news. Trying to get my cursor to actually work. There we go. All right, well, the news this week is that there's a report from FERC that is indicating that in last year, 2022, about 74% of all utility scale solar was from renewable energy. Of that, about 39.6% was from solar, about 33.9% from wind. Natural gas comprised about 26% of all of the new energy out there. No coal, no nuclear. So that's sort of keeps up with trends. And now, as of now, renewables account for about 27% of all of the grid capacity that's available, the generating capacity. Wind is still in the lead in renewables with about 11.4%, hydro at about 9%, and solar at about 6%. And looking forward into the future, EIA, the Energy Information Administration, has come up with their projections for 2023. And this is based on applications that are currently in the pipeline. And they're anticipating that in 2023, we'll see about 3 times as much solar installed in the US as we saw in 2022. A lot of that is because in 2022, there were a lot of delays because of supply chain issues, also interconnection delays for their applications. So they're anticipating a lot of this will work through the system in 2023. All of that will be installed in 2023 will, at this projected, be 54% of all of the new generating capacity on the grid will come from solar. Second, which I found very interesting, is that battery storage systems will represent the second most installed grid energy source. That will be about 17% of all of the new capacity on the grid. This is something that wasn't even measured like a year and a half ago or so. And then wind will be about 11%. Now, when they look at forward off into 3 years, FERC is giving in their quote, high probability estimates that solar capacity will see about 75 gigawatts of solar over the next 3 years, which will double the installed capacity that currently exists. And what's really interesting is when they look at the pipeline, what's out there, they anticipate while 75 gigawatts of solar will be installed, only about half a gigawatt of natural gas. So pretty much half, natural gas is falling by the wayside at this point, the same way coal did before. Okay, and they're anticipating that by the end of 2025, we'll see about 33% of the grid's capacity will be solar, or will be renewable, sorry. Of the amount of utilities solar that's being installed, 40% of this is happening in 2 states, in Texas and in California. But what's interesting is that the Midwest is going to see quite a spike in utility scale solar. Ohio is projected to be number 3. Indiana projected to be number 5. And from what I could see, a lot of this is coming about because there's a lot of farmland, of course, open space to put this solar in, but also because it's part of the PJ&M regional transmission authority, that can be distributed quite broadly all the way up to New York City. And there is available capacity in that region. So that's why a lot of that's happening. Texas this year, and late last year, faced a couple of winter storms. And as you'll recall, a couple of years ago, there was a big winter storm, massive power outages. A number of people died. Seems to me it's like 700 people died. And a lot of the proponents of fossil fuel jumped up and down saying, see, it was all the wind turbines freezing up. That's what caused it. When they further investigated, turns out it was some of that, but most of the problem came from natural gas and coal power plants where moisture in the lines froze up. And they couldn't get that energy source. So everybody was to blame. Well, when December's storm came along right before Christmas, it was a very, very cold snap with a lot of high winds. Well, renewable energy really even outperformed its capacity, its nameplate rating on these systems. So a lot of the advocates of renewables were jumping up and down saying, see, solar and wind, very reliable. They came through when all of these coal and natural gas power plants all had to close again because all of the valves froze up, things of that nature. Well, then February 1st comes along and there's the second storm, which had a different profile. It was a lot of freezing rain, which of course froze up the wind turbines, froze up the solar panels. And so capacity of solar dropped dramatically. So we started to see a number of the opponents of renewables, the proponents of fossil fuel, sending out silly tweets like this about, wind and solar can't handle it. So basically when it worked, the renewable people were jumping up and down, and when it didn't work, the anti-renewable folks are jumping up and down. Reality is there will be situations when wind and solar doesn't work. There will be situations when fossil fuels don't work. That's just kind of the way it is. That's why we need a good energy mix. A couple of new innovations in products. I don't know if I qualify this as a true innovation, but basically a company is marketing vertical solar, and they're using bifacial panels in this. I'm not quite sure if they're doing an east-west orientation or if it is, since they're bifacial, I guess it doesn't really matter. But what they're arguing for is that this is great in agricultural situations, can be used as a windbreak to protect crops, can be used to avoid UV damage. They were showing a lot of this with vineyards, which I guess it's an issue with vineyards. They have a very, very small footprint, and they can run along highways, they can run along railways. So a lot of good applications. What they don't say on their website, I really walk through pretty much everything on their website, never mention the fact that it's going to produce a lot less power than a traditional system that's oriented directly towards the sun. So, but there may be situations where that comes into play. And then another area of innovation, we're seeing a company called B2U Storage Solutions, and they've been operating now for about 2 years a battery to grid system where they're selling power from batteries that's accumulated through renewable sources directly to the grid. But these are all from salvaged and recycled EV battery packs coming primarily from Honda and Nissan vehicles. This particular installation in Lancaster, California has about 1,300 used Nissan and Honda battery packs, and they say they're actually using the controllers from within this pack, and they hook these things up in series and in parallel so that weak batteries don't impact in a string situation the way they would otherwise. They began actually operating this system in 2020, and last year they're saying that this particular facility that's in the picture generated about $1 million in revenue from the grid. So it's a nice thing. When batteries go bad in the vehicle, they don't go completely bad. They just go to a point where the range is perhaps not acceptable in an EV situation. So there is some life left in those batteries. So nice way of recycling the EV battery packs. And that's the news for this week. Anybody have any comments or anything to add there? I know, Chris, you mentioned about a Michigan battery facility from Ford, did you say?
Ford Motor Company, yes. It's over $1 billion. And they're working with a company in China. Like I said, It's not a quote joint venture with them, but they're sharing the engineering and technology. It's supposed to go to one of the old Ford plants that's up there right now.
Mhm. Okay, I think we're
It's
going to see a
initially-
lot more of that because of the fact that, you know, the investment or the Inflation Reduction Act wants or calls for domestically manufactured products. And of course, the EV rebate from the government or tax credit from the government is predicated on the fact that the materials in that EV, it's manufactured in the United States. So currently, my understanding is there are no electric vehicles that qualify for that tax credit because most of the batteries, most of those technologies come from somewhere else. So,
And the other thing I seen in the news, a question, this is a question. They're
Yeah.
saying that whales are being killed by the turbines.
by
Is
wind
that the
turbines,
thing? The wind turbines, yeah.
what are
They're
they
saying, that
doing?
was in the news several times now, that say the whales are dying because of the wind turbines.
Oh, are the whales walking across West Texas? Is that the
They're
thing?
not very specific of why they're dying. They're just saying that it appears that whales that get in the areas where the wind turbines are, they seem to be dying and whatever. Which-
That
And
seems.
No, there was a case where, and I think they documented mostly sperm whales that go along the bottom of the ocean, scooping up food, and they get tangled up in the cables
Oh,
that are on the
okay.
ocean floor.
So those could be wind turbine cables or communication cables or old fish netting that gets cut off, and it could be almost anything. Yep, that makes sense. I know that there was another issue with certain harmonic systems from Navy vessels that there was some concern about that. But to me, yeah, we need to be careful, obviously, but that seems quite a stretch that the whales are being impacted. There are a few offshore, not in America. America doesn't really have offshore wind, but I could see up in the North Sea quite a lot of offshore wind. Anything else to add from the news of the week?
This is just not exactly, and pardon if you already said this while I was getting on, but we went out with the intent of buying a VIN number on a Bolt Saturday, and their Chevy is so far behind producing them that they're not even, if you put in money, you can put in an order, but you can't have any assurance of getting a VIN number in time for the, how it's going to work with the rebate
Oh, really?
tax
Huh.
credit. So I don't know if there's any.
Interesting. My son just went through that, and they basically ordered, didn't put any money down, and were told they wouldn't have any idea when they would get it, but it took about 6 weeks. They were called up and said, come pick up your car.
Okay, I know that there's quite in short supply. When we ordered our Prius Prime a couple of years ago, they had only allocated like 6 vehicles for the entire Midwestern US. So we had quite a few months wait to get that one. And they kept calling us up saying, well, it's on a ship coming in from Japan or something. And it's like, well, good news. It's not in my driveway. So I think we're going to be dealing with these supply chain issues for quite a while. As we mentioned last week, First Solar in Toledo announced their solar manufacturing capacity is sold out through 2026. So, if you wanted to order panels, and they are the largest panel manufacturer in the United States. So if you wanted to order from them, you would not get delivery until probably 2027. So, all right. Anything else in the news of the world? I guess, well, as you're thinking on that, an issue was raised about used solar panels, purchasing of used solar panels. And I can throw that out to the group, see if anybody's had any issues with that. I assume, I think, Chad, it was more about small numbers, right? Not ordering huge numbers of solar panels. The issue that I've run into had to do with warranties. If you're not the original purchaser of it, the warranty is probably not transferable. So that's something to concern yourself with. Whether you can find them, you know, in sufficient quantity for yours. You're doing a solar generator, is that right?
Right,
Yeah, so you only need one or two.
right.
Yeah. The UL, you know, if you get a good panel, it's going to be certified. The 1703, but now I think there's a different number, like 67103 or something. Does anybody remember what this now the new international panel certification number is? So I'll just make up a number, but it's something like that. It ends in 03. So anyway, just make sure it's certified so you're not getting some trash panel. That would be my major concern. And you know, and of course, if you're buying something off eBay, it's, you know, if it's damaged, you may not be able to address that. So, you know, you may not be able to return it. But I've actually bought panels from Craigslist and eBay, you know, for my own personal use and had no problems with them. But I wasn't really worried about the certification or the warranty in those instances.
And what
Shipping,
would
ahead.
a used panel go for?
Oh, what should he use? Well, certainly much less than a new one, I would think. You know, I think I paid about 50% of new price when I bought them. And the panels I bought were actually brand new. They had never been used, but they were used. I mean, it was a weird situation where they got a double shipment for an installation. And they kept trying to get them returned. And after 2 years, the company wouldn't respond about taking back something they had double shipped, but they had never been billed for them. So then finally, after 2 years, they just sort of said, all right, we'll just sell these, get them out of our garage. So, so they were brand new panels. So, and then somebody raised something about shipping. I thought I heard, and that's something, that's one of the nice things if you're getting it local, is you don't have to deal with the cost of shipping. All right, I'm going to jump. Yep.
UL certification 1703. I just Googled it.
Yeah, it's 1703, but that's actually been supplanted by a new designation. It's
Right.
it's something like 6703 or something like that anyway. But 1703, if it's listed, that's the one you're looking for. But I know it's been supplanted. So they've tried to internationalize it. So
Should I take a meter and take a reading of the panel?
oh, that'd be a good idea. You know, if you can go physically inspect them. I did that when I bought mine. Just take a multimeter and put them in a position where you can test it. It'll tell you if the polarity is reversed. If you get a negative, it'll also tell you, you know, if you're buying multiple panels, they should all be generating about the same voltage. You know, they'll be off a little bit, but, you know, obviously it's probably not a good idea to stick them in direct sunlight and test them but you know, you'll be able to find out if there's a broken, if it's not generating. If you're buying, say, 3 panels and one comes up and it's 38.2 volts and another's 38.5 volts, and then the third one's 10.2 volts, you know, there's something wrong with that third panel. So
Great, thanks.
sure thing. Okay, well, I thought what I'd do is touch on cybersecurity. And whoops, I got to get into my, here we go. Yep, I'll get out of the way of the graphic here. So cybersecurity, and one of the reasons I thought we should touch on this, even though it's not something that you're going to run into a lot, but it's something you should be aware of. A couple of instances here in the last couple of years have raised some of the awareness about cybersecurity. The Colonial Pipeline, that wasn't a solar thing, but it was an oil and gas pipeline where cybersecurity, it was hacked into and shut down, which then caused panic buying and gasoline and disruption, and oil prices spiked. Russia has been attacking the grid in the Ukraine a number of times, with cybersecurity attacks, and that's been an issue there. And we've seen some attacks here in the United States as well. So that's an issue from the grid size level. Solar Winds, that was, it sounds like it's a solar company. It's not. It was a financial company of sorts. And they had a cyber attack from Russia. Here in the US, it was like a Trojan horse or a worm or something, where they got into that. And then when Solar Winds sent out to about 30,000 of their customers, they sent out software updates. And this put cyber vulnerabilities into those companies, which then allowed these Russian hackers to get in and access theirs. So these are some large cybersecurity issues. We're seeing increases, but primarily focused on larger grid type systems as opposed to individual installations. So as part of this discussion, I wanted to drill down a little bit lower in the food chain, because we don't normally deal in the grid level activity, but I think there are still some things we can do that allow for us to protect our systems. So there have been a number of reports recently, and these are good references if you want to look up in a little more depth. Sandia National Labs had a, oops, I jumped way ahead here when I was, let me back up a bit. We're going to mess with you here. There we go. Yeah, they have the roadmap to cybersecurity. The DOE has cybersecurity recommendations. So if you want to look up online, these things are more at the high level, but thought they were worthy of being mentioned. The roadmap, this was quite an in-depth study here for solar cybersecurity. And this was the graphic they produced. And I know they love these kind of graphics. It was not very helpful to my way of thinking. So I dug into it, and basically their recommendations are that the PV industry work with cybersecurity experts to come up with best practices, that people in the industry and end user customers be informed and trained about the issues of cybersecurity. So we're doing our part here today. Information sharing systems should be put in place so that all the various players can coordinate in the midst of a cyber attack. That's something that often doesn't happen. Standards and requirements should be established for photovoltaic products to protect or to try and minimize cybersecurity threats. There should be cross-platform guidelines. So basically, the grid is focused on their world of cybersecurity. Industry is focused on their world of cybersecurity. Residential, probably not focused on anything at all except what's on television. But there should be some sort of cross discussion amongst these, because the residential systems, the commercial systems interact with the grid. So there should be some cross discussions there. The existing standards that are out there, codes, standards, the standards for products should begin to incorporate cybersecurity. We're seeing that in the NEC. In the latest edition of the NEC, the term cybersecurity for the first time is being introduced into the code. And I did see some discussion that at some point they're looking at even a chapter on cybersecurity being within the electrical code. The PV industry should come up with some commercial security prevention products I guess to my way of thinking, sort of a Norton antivirus kind of thing that's available, or maybe it's a hardware solution or something like that. Hopefully it's not as annoying as Norton, where they're constantly telling me I gotta buy it or else. And then cybersecurity should become part of the routine maintenance process of solar systems. So this is something for those on the call who are doing large commercial systems that maybe want to put that into their practices to look at cybersecurity issues when they're looking at things like soiling or connections and all of those kind of things. Just another thing to check out. When we get down to the smaller systems, we're talking about what they refer to in the lingo as operational technologies or OT issues. And with small systems, increasingly they're becoming more vulnerable because the products within our installation are connected to the grid. They are part of the Internet of Things. Very specifically, the inverters are often communicating through the internet to monitoring systems, load management systems. So if it is connected, then you're going to have the potential where somebody could step in and have physical disruptions. Yeah, Matt, I see your hand is raised there. Did you have a question about that?
Oh, no, I'll give you a brainful on this one, because that's my new degree plan that's launching in the fall. It's just up this alley. I've spent the last year and a half researching this problem, and there's a company called Residio, which used to be Honeywell Home. And that's, from a home perspective, that's what they're looking at, is as they tie batteries into home networking systems for whole homes, smart homes. And then there's other companies that are doing it from the commercial side. And I've got a degree plan launching just for these types of subjects you're talking about. That is on a lot of people's radar from the integrator market, all these low-lying fruits.
Well, and what are some of the risks that you're seeing, or do you have specific instances of things that actually did happen?
I don't know of anything that specifically has happened, but you know, when you look at, I don't know if you've ever heard of DEF CON. DEF CON's a show in Vegas that happens every year, and they tell you if you're going to go, it's like the hacker convention of all shows. But if you go to DEF CON, you don't bring your technology unless you want it to get hacked. But I mean, they'll talk about hacking elevators or whatever else. And so looking at all of these different technologies we're putting in homes and commercial buildings, they're being open to problems because of, you know, what's the vulnerability. I mean, here you were talking, was 2-3 years ago, they were talking about people hacking Ring doorbells and things. So as we put these different things in, are they really ironclad type devices? And normally looking at your OT networking and stuff, not your IT networking, which OT networking has more to do with control interface. Now you're networking all these different devices, and you know, where you've got firewalls and all these different, like you say, the antiviruses built around computers. Now you've got these dumber technologies, if you want to call them, that, you know, how hackable are they? From a program logic controls perspective, the virus that they put on Stuxnet, or the virus they put on the pipeline over here about a year ago. So these are all things that people are looking at, and having worked so much in the integration as well as solar for the last little bit. You're hitting right on everything everybody's talking about.
Okay, well, I know that, for example, just as an example of what you're talking about, the Target was hacked, and they were actually hacked through their smart thermostat, their headquarters, and then they were able to get into their credit card database and actually pulled about 1 million credit cards off of their system, but they came in through the smart thermostat. So that's one of those issues. With the Internet of Things, for instance, if somebody hacked into your inverter, they could overcharge and damage your batteries if they were so inclined. They could limit production from your array. Again, that seems relatively minor, but also somewhat weirdly malicious. You know, so those are issues that are out there. So they could have physical disruption of your system. The online management monitoring, that's probably the way they would get in, I assume. That's but when you start getting into load management systems, especially I mean, one of the advantages of these systems is from my phone, I can turn on and off circuits within my home. Well, somebody else can do that too, but perhaps even a little more scary than that is they can begin to determine, are you home? If you've got vacation settings within your home and you've turned those on, somebody hacks in, they now know you're out of town. They know when it was set, when it's set to come back on. You know, so you've got privacy issues, you've got security issues, you've got a lot of those kind of things other than the physical disruption of your system. Another thing that I found quite interesting as I was researching this is EV charging stations are a significant point of vulnerability. There have been some studies there by Sandia National Labs. When you go to charge your vehicle, it's interacting with a lot of different systems. Some of these things that they identified were skimming of credit card information. You know, you go to a public charging station, you pay for it. Well, of course, that's vulnerable for taking your credit card information. It can hijack the entire network. That's a possibility. We've discussed it in past sessions about Tesla wanting to set up, you know, a virtual power plant using everybody's vehicles as the source of that energy. So at a grid level, you've got issues there. When you plug in your charging station, it can be interfacing with dealerships like the Tesla system does, with your phone. It can interfere with the navigation system of your vehicle, with automated driver assist systems within your vehicle, as like autonomous driving, for example, in there. And they can even throw worms and Trojan horses, or whatever you want to call them, into your software updates within your electric vehicle. I could see where somebody might want to monitor your location, you know, and suddenly you're tracking your EV through a hacker system like that. And then when you start talking about bidirectional charging, well, that's a whole new level of issues, because not only am I interfering with the vehicle, but now I'm going to be interfering with the home or the grid where that power is being sent back to. So there's a lot of vulnerability there. I know that they're doing work on that, but it's just something to consider in that world. So as an installer of systems, what can you do to try and minimize? I don't think you can eliminate it, but you can try and minimize what's happening in cybersecurity. So one of them, of course, a lot of this stuff is logical. It's the same stuff with your computers and stuff like that, is password management, right? Change the password that comes with the system. I know when you're installing a Solar Edge inverter, it has a password. I forget, it's like 010111 or something like that. I'll bet you 99% of all of those systems out there, that is the password of the system, because you never bothered to change the password. So that's something to deal with. Train your employees, the users of the system, employees at the company, if you're doing a company-wide system, on some of the threats, similar to how you have to train them about don't open up emails that you don't recognize, because they can be those phishing expeditions. Well, the same things can happen with your solar system. So just try and make people aware that that's an issue. Physically try and protect the network that is connected to with, you know, spyware software. You know, if you're hooking in your system to a Wi-Fi, the protection of your system is only as good as the protection of that Wi-Fi network that you're connecting into. So you want to make sure that Wi-Fi network is secured as much as possible. Most of the inverter manufacturers have security protocols that are listed in the manuals, things that you're supposed to follow. So follow those protocols. They're there for a reason. If you can, set up two-factor authentication. So when you're logging into the system, I know it's a pain in the butt where they call your phone or whatever to verify that it is in fact you, but that's going to add a level of security there. And another thing you may want to do is address cybersecurity in the contracts that you're writing. Not only the contracts with the customers, but any contracts with subcontractors, perhaps even vendors, if you're doing a large system like that, but address who is responsible and for cybersecurity issues, to what extent that responsibility extends. It may just be a hold harmless clause in your own contract saying, listen, I don't have a lot of control over cybersecurity and don't assume I do, you know, and put that into your contract that you do not hold responsibility for the cybersecurity issues once the system is installed. Physical protection of the facility. We're beginning to see that with some of the larger, like people shooting at substations, you know, things like that. Well, I don't know, physically protecting your array, your installation. There are limitations there as to what you can do, but I think that's more about vandalism in my way of thinking than cybersecurity, but it's still a security issue. And perhaps even consider cyber insurance. There is such a thing where you can take out an insurance policy to protect you against business losses or other damages that are the result of a hack or some sort of intrusion into your system. I think most of us at this moment have not had to deal with cybersecurity in the world of photovoltaics. Probably have had to in other situations, but I think this is something that you're going to see happening more and more frequently, where just like hacks with your computers, with your laptops, it's going to become a normal thing that we have to deal with. And probably in my thinking on here, the two things I would look at specifically at this moment is dealing with passwords properly, login and passwords. Just make sure that you do that, you change them often if a lot of activity is going on. And the second thing is look at some wording, some hold harmless wording in your contracts, just to start protecting yourself a bit, because I wouldn't be surprised if in the not too distant future, we see a large network of installations like Enphase or SolarEdge. They make up a significant amount of the installed base. And somebody might decide it would be giggles to go in and disrupt the entire installation of those. And you don't want your customers coming back at you going, you should have anticipated this. You should have done something. You recommended Enphase, and now it's, you know, I've got a bunch of junk here that's all destroyed and it's your fault. So put in something in your contracts. Okay. Anybody have any comments on that or anything to add?
Jay, I've got a question more than anything else. So in the security world for like home and security and fire and commercial, they have what's called central stations for monitoring. Do you see that maybe as being a possibility as you bring a system online that, you know, you could contract with like a central monitoring station to help monitor your system for those types of things?
I could see that happening, and it probably already is with the larger systems, because there are a lot of companies out there that do operation and maintenance contracts with these. And part of what they're doing is monitoring the efficiency of your system. They're looking for damaged panels, damaged and they're doing financial evaluations to make sure your system is performing as expected. So I could see them putting some sort of cyber layer on top of that. But those things, they're not cheap. I mean, they're something you're paying. But if you've got $2 million invested in your solar array, then hiring a company to monitor that investment is prudent. But for somebody's home system, you know, where you've just spent 10 grand or 20 grand on your system, I don't know that you're going to hire a company like that. Although some of the companies like ADT are getting into the solar world, and maybe that's something they're envisioning, is to begin looking at load management offerings, but also security. I mean, if you're already in the security world, that seems like something that would be a natural add-on. Anybody else have any comments on it? All right. Well, hearing none.
I have a question.
Oh yeah.
I'm just sitting here thinking, if say like I have an in-phase product and it gets hacked, are they like a computer? Can you just kind of like go in and say, let's go back to an original state?
I assume that they are. That would be my guess. I know from my experience, I've been able, Enphase has been able to go in from California and make changes in my inverter, you know, that was sitting in Pennsylvania. So my guess is there's a reset button somewhere. If it's just a software issue there, you know, if they caused physical damage to the unit, I suspect nothing you can do.
But you may be responsible to have an old copy of the software, like on a thumb drive or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've never seen something like that. My guess is Enphase could do it, could reset it, but I don't know how I would be able to do that.
Okay.
There was a situation and this had to do with the Hawaiian grid, and they needed to have a specific settings for that was universal to all the Enphase inverters in Hawaii. And it was a source of pride for that moment where Enphase said that they could go in and switch the grid profile for all the inverters on the islands to make them match that profile. So it was something that they could toggle switch over to a different grid profile from their corporate headquarters in California, and it would change all the parameters of all the inverters in that state. So it can be centrally controlled. And I do know they can reset, like you said, Jay, they can reset the firmware on different inverters. And sometimes they will send out new firmware updates. And sometimes the older inverters don't have that. So they will send it out from their office. Again, the question is whether whether a hacker could cause physical damage to the inverter. And to a large number of them.
Yeah. I assume that there's a possibility they could. When you were saying that there, Bill, it just reminded me, when you do install an Enphase system, one of the steps is you update the software, you know, within the system. And that usually takes a fair amount of time, you know, going through. So clearly I assume updates come periodically, and hopefully they're starting to put in some antivirus, anti-hacking kind of software into their own system. Be curious to see how deeply they're getting into it. So go ahead, Bill, and then Chris.
Some of the new inverters, the IQ8s, have so many more. The circuitry is a quantum jump from what they used to be with the IQ7s or the IQ6s, and so and I know that they've taken the manufacturing away from, and I'm not sure if it's universally away from China in terms of the circuitry, and it's gone to India. So I have no idea what what could have been planted, at some point, at some level in the inverter, in terms of the circuitry.
Yeah.
kill switch or what?
I did see that Enphase is moving some of its manufacturing to the US. I saw an article like that. And when I got mine, I thought it was funny on the side of the box, it says, you know, proudly designed in the USA. And then in very small letters, it said assembled in Mexico, you know, so that was, so Chris, you had a comment there?
I was gonna say that my Solar Edge inverter on a regular basis, because I check it regularly, see what my output is, it's always got updates, always. And I would assume some of it must be for cyber because, I mean, what else would they be changing? Maybe some parameters, but some of them have taken quite a bit of time on the Solar Edge for them to update that new software in there.
Mhm.
So
Okay. All right. Well, so any other comments before we call it a day? All right. Well, then I'll see you guys next week. If you have any suggestions of a topic, just let me know. All right. Take care.
Thanks, Jay.
All right.
Jay?
Bye-bye. Oh, yeah.
I just have a general question, and I'm a complete beginner, so I'm not sure can I ask completely beginner questions or not
You
really?
certainly can. Sure. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you so much. I have a friend who is donating like 30 panels to me, and I'm not sure exactly what they are, Is it a good idea to take older panels and start, you know, figuring out the frames and the stuff like that, or is it just go with the new stuff and not hassle with any transformations?
When you
So-
say older panels, how old are you talking about?
Okay, I'm thinking probably like 8 years old or
8
so.
years old. And you're saying you might want to change the frame, or, you know, normally you just take the panel as it is.
Yeah, no, and somebody told me though, but with the new, if you buy newer panels, then they fit exactly well with the frame, the frames that you put on a roof, and for
Oh.
microinverters, then that's much easier,
Yeah.
things like that.
Well, yeah, that part of it, some of the issues that come to mind initially is, are you getting enough panels to do the whole job, or are you going to be augmenting it? Because visually it looks weird if you've got different types of panels right next to each other. The other thing is with the newer microinverters, they may or may not be compatible with the size of the panel if it's that much older. My guess is it's probably a 60 cell panel, and most of these microinverters are going to still deal with 60 cell panels, but you'll want to check to make sure they are compatible. You can get older inverters too, and maybe match it that way. Something to consider there. If they're really, really old panels, they might not have MC4 connectors. They might have MC3s, which are no longer supported by the code. So that would be an issue to deal with. So you might want to just double check. If you 8 years is a long time in solar, but the panel technology, at least I don't imagine it's changed that much. If you had said 15 years, then I'd say, no, don't even touch them. But if they're
Okay.
UL 1703 certified, that's going to tell you a certain, you know, quality issue of manufacturing. So those are some of the things I would look for.
Okay, UL 1703.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Jay.
All right.
And am I correct? You just got to be a little bit careful because it's not really age, but virtually every panel manufacturer has different, you know, some are 32 millimeters, some are 35, some are 40 millimeter. You know, they have different clamping areas. So you kind of have to adjust it per panel. And you can't necessarily do it for one panel and assume it's going to work for another.
Yeah, like with Iron Ridge, for example, you know, you'd have to see what is the vertical dimension of that panel and then buy a clamp that works with that dimension of the panel. So you'll just have to, you can get that off of the panel specs. And panel specs are available on the internet. Even 8-year-old panel specs are out there. So it'll tell you how many millimeters it's going to be, and make sure you get the right clamps. And, you know, that's an issue. Another thing might be, we've seen a lot of issues with the MC4 connections. You know, that if you've got mismatched MC4 connectors hooking in, for example, if you're hooking in your microinverters or optimizers in with the panel. Make sure that the connectors are going to be sympathetic with each other, because you can get arcing issues like that if you've got an old cheap connector on there. So worst case is you'll just have to cut off the connectors and put a new, better connector on there.
And I'm sorry, I came in a little bit late, but apparently there was a hack with Enphase, and I guess I'm wondering if that's true. Is Enphase really different, because SMA and SolarEdge, SolarArc, they all kind of have online monitoring and online updates.
Yeah.
So is Enphase unique there?
No, I
Okay.
think that's how rumors get started. I was speculating that some hacker might at some point decide to try and hack a company like Enphase. I'm not aware of anything specifically that has happened, but all of these things are possibilities. And we were even talking about they probably have routine updates, that go out there and may or may not deal with cyber attacks.
Thanks for clarifying that, Jake. Hey, Martin, one of the things that you need to keep in mind probably is that UL certifies safety of the panel. It doesn't certify the quality of the panel. So go to something like the DNV PV module scorecard. You can look it up, and they put it out every year, and they will give you the best, the most reliable panels according to their testing. And so you can look at that and see if some of them are, and it really gives you a pretty good update in terms of the high quality panels. It doesn't talk much about low quality panels. I mean, it won't name the worst, and there are lots of manufacturers with lots of different panels.
Mhm.
Yeah. I should also mention, since we're talking about panel quality, there's a rating system they call tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 panels, but that has nothing to do with the quality of the panel per se. That has to do with the financial health of the company that manufactures them. So don't get confused about that a tier 1 panel must necessarily be better than a tier 2. All it says is from a financial investment rating, it's a tier 1 company, and you're probably going to get a better return on your money. It's kind of a Bloomberg thing as opposed to a quality thing. So, anybody else? We're wandering around. Thanks for your question there, Martin.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to actually end the discussion this time. All right, so we'll see you guys next week. All right, take care.
Thanks, Jeff.
Bye-bye.